Human resources employees, what are your best HR nightmare stories? Story 1. One place I used to work. One of the upper management guys who was in charge of the warehouse would hop on the forklifts and do donuts. He had colon cancer and was always having surgeries to remove another section of colon, so he had a colostomy bag. He would squeeze air out of his colostomy bag while he was doing donuts on the forklifts. It would waft this god-awful stench everywhere. Everyone thought it was hilarious and would immediately run outside for a smoke break until the scent dissipated. The smell was bad enough it made a coworker puke. Also had another manager there eat 610 sacks of White Castle sliders for lunch. He ate the last 10 sack on the toilet. I have no idea how he could eat with the sounds and stenches he was emitting from his other end. It sounded like someone trying to drown Donald Duck in a puddle while tooting a tuba. No one went into that bathroom for the rest of the day. Story 2. I am on the HR team that supports a wide variety of U.S. cities for our company, including our colorful Florida locations. This is the best story I heard. We had some woman trying to avoid doing work by sitting out in her car in the parking lot. While she was hiding out there, she needed to use the restroom. Well, instead of going back inside or doing literally anything else, she decides to pee out her car window. Even though I am also a woman, I was impressed and disgusted by the physics behind this feat. She had stuck her bare jerk outside the window and just went for it. Unbeknownst to her, her male coworker had arrived at work late due to an appointment. He drove past to find a parking spot as this was happening and got full view. He then reported the incident to us. One of our HR people had to investigate this, and sure enough, parking lot cameras could corroborate his story. Our HR person confronted the woman. Her response, "Well, how did he know it was me? It could have been anyone." We thought, okay, fair enough. The cameras aren't CSI grade zoom, so we only saw the jerk part. It was harder to completely identify the face. So we went back to the male peer and asked how he knew it was her. His response, "Oh, it was definitely her. The face tattoos are pretty recognizable. We definitely don't get paid enough for this. Eat it. For you investigative sleuths out there, our cameras are not as amazing as you think they are. It's a parking lot, not the White House. The one camera that caught the event didn't have hyper zoom on the license plate. That's why we have a witness." Story 3. I had one employee submit a form to increase her own salary. She also forged her manager's signature. Like for real? Story 4. My friend was doing hiring for a staffing agency during college. A guy who we went to high school came in looking for a job. He told the candidate that he had 2 jobs. One paid 10 an hour and the other paid 11. The only thing was that the 11 an hour job requires a substances test. And if you fail the substances test, you can't get either. He said that he wanted the 11 an hour job. Now we knew him well enough to know that he liked smoking. So my friend reiterated the substances test fail rule. Dude said he was good on Friday to take the test Monday. Come Monday, he took the substances test. Pissed hot for plant substance, cocaine, amphetamines, and some other shoot that gets out of your system in 48 ARs. Answer: Man, I'm almost scared we know the same person. This was a woman, though. She got a new job knowing there was a substances test on her first day, and she wouldn't be given a second chance if she didn't pass. The weekend before she starts, she wants to celebrate her new job. Smokes plant substance, does some shrooms, a few amphetamines on top of it all. Goes in on Monday, fails, loses the job. And the most perplexing part was her explanation to us. We basically went in a circular argument of, you knew there was a test? Yes. And you knew all this stuff would fail you? Yeah. And you did. Want the job? Yeah. Why the hell did you do the stuff then? I wanted to celebrate my new job. But you knew the stuff you celebrated with would lose you the job. Yeah. Why didn't you just get tipsy or do something that wouldn't show up? I wanted to smoke. But you also wanted the job? Yeah, but I wanted to smoke to celebrate the job, knowing that smoking would mean you didn't have the job. I just really wanted to smoke. I didn't feel like getting tipsy. Repeat. Story 5. Not in HR, but my previous senior manager was renowned for sleeping with colleagues. He was married with kids. Before I started there, I remember seeing a huge banner plastered across a footbridge that everyone leaving work by car had to drive under to get to the motorway. The sign said, Joe Bloggs, not actual name, cheating bastard. Turns out he was cheating on his wife with a team leader from another dept, and was cheating on his mistress with another team leader from yet another dept. Both the team leaders found out about each other and had a massive fight in the reception of the building. By the time I started at the company, both of the team leaders were no longer working there. Answer. Turns out he was cheating on his wife with a team leader from another dept, and was cheating on his mistress with another team leader from yet another dept. Oh, I see. They didn't have a problem when it was them having an affair with a married man. But when it turned out he was dipping his pen into several bottles of company ink, that's when the mistresses had an issue. Seems a bit hypocritical. Story 6. I work in recruitment, so not exactly HR. A guy had applied for a job that required a DBS check, police check. He filled the DBS and all his other checks flew through. The DBS came back as he had committed a crime in the past. Now, on our end, only the guy who will be applicant's manager and a senior in our department can see the DBS result. He called the department unhappy the job had been withdrawn. He then sent a long email in, begging for another chance. He said when he was 17, he beat 2 women up, then threatened the cops with a gun. We're in the UK, so guns are pretty rare, especially in the 1970s. He went into detail about the attempted violation. This dude wanted a job in a hospital. It's a no, mate. Story 7. There was a dude in our other facility that was going around and wiping their jerk and shoving the chute back up into the toilet paper dispenser so that when the next person goes to reach. Story 8. Came into work early for a morning shift, work in an industrial lab. Heard noises from the back corner of the office portion of the building, but can't make out what they are because of distortion. Head that way to see what was going on as I was the only one there. So I thought, at 3 a.m., see my lab manager fudge the district manager, her boss, while the HR rep for the district is sitting there, enjoying the view. I noped and went to the lab and tried to forget what happened. Answer. Had one I heard about. To set the scene, executive boardroom just before start of business. There is a meeting booked by high-level officers in the company meeting clients first thing that morning. The admin in charge of setting up is notorious for being early to make sure meeting setup is perfect and everything goes seamlessly. She walks in on a naked man on the table. Thinks, but is not entirely sure someone else just slipped out. She freaks out and naked man is canned. He was even a contractor, not full-time. The suspicion is he was not as fast to get dressed as the person he was having intimacy with. Rumor says it was an exec who knew full well that the admin would be in earlier than expected and used the incident to shed a now inconvenient lover. Surprisingly, the naked man continued to insist he was alone and doing naked yoga to the end. Story 9. The workers had races with those motorized forklifts. One did not know that there was freshly poured concrete. Got the forklift stuck in it. Damage was $100,000. Big foundation for a new storage facility. According to the union contracts, such damages are paid for by the company unless it was intentionally done. walked into my boss's office, told him about the situation. Okay, Shadavi, can you please return to your office for a while? Okay. As soon as I was at my desk, I heard the loudest "Gott verdammtes Scheiße" from his office. Then my phone rang and he told me to inform the insurance, which ended up paying less than 10K of the damage. Otherwise, the usual HR nightmare is just people not keeping their documents in order. Answer: my very first job was in a warehouse with these big pallet jacks, like forklifts, but only raises a few inches, that we had to stand on. We used to race the pallet jacks to settle disputes once in a while. That finally stopped because of an unrelated incident in which a coworker crushed another's ankle against a support beam, with one of them for driving too fast and not paying attention. Story 10. Saw a guy blatantly lie in his recruitment form. Watching him fill it out in front of me, it was total bollocks. Apparently, he was 15th in line to the throne, went to Eton, studied at Oxford, and served in the army for 9 years after training at Sandhurst. Not bad for a 21-year-old, who had in fact spent 3 years in a young offenders institute, battling a substances problem. Answer: my dad ran into similar stuff weirdly often at his job. People love to lie about military service and turning "I attended a free evening lecture at Harvard" into "I attended Harvard." He occasionally reported the really egregious ones, but was nearly always told that the places wouldn't bother doing anything about it as long as the applicants didn't forge documents or forge communication. The U.S. Army in particular said it's not worth it because it's so common. It'd be like going after everyone who tells a drunken, embellished story at the bar. Story 11. 1. I had a bookkeeper that paid himself 2 checks every week. We did not catch it for a year. 2. Another bookkeeper quit and files for unemployment. He then claimed a claim with EEOC that he had a disability, and we failed to make accommodations for him. The disability was alcoholism, and the accommodations were leaving early to attend AA meetings. Seriously, we had to hire a lawyer to fight that. 3. A guy I hired hurt himself on the first hour of the first day of work. He claimed he fell and hit his head on the wall. He was out for weeks on workman's comp form, the concussion. Then, when he came back on light duty, he could only do desk work but managed to fall again in the bathroom and hit his head again. It took me 9 months to get rid of him. It turns out this was not his first rodeo. When I called his former employer, the lady I spoke to made an offhand comment about workplace accidents and head injuries and the importance of cameras in the workplace. 4. While doing a remodel of a museum, one of my employees helped himself to a gun that was on display. It was very ugly and embarrassing for everyone. My company was kicked off the job and banned from ever working for them again. I fired the guy and he filed a discrimination claim with EOC because I did not fire the whole crew, just him. I got more. Answer: 2. Another bookkeeper quit and files for unemployment. He then claimed a claim with EEOC that he had a disability, and we failed to make accommodations for him. The disability was alcoholism, and the accommodations were leaving early to attend AA meetings. Seriously, we had to hire a lawyer to fight that. In Canada, if they disclosed their condition to the employer, this is actually a disability, and leaving early to attend AA would be a reasonable accommodation. However, it kind of sounds like they didn't inform you until the unemployment claim. Story 12. Finally, all my misery is worth it. Here are just a few from my many years working in HR in startups. We hired a very senior person, management team, and for his work visa, I needed a copy of his university degree. Followed up repeatedly, he kept making excuses like, "Oh, I just moved, I need to find where I put it," or "I need to see if it's in the basement at my parents' place." Turns out he had lied on his CV. He resigned immediately. CEO had threesomes with employees and ordered Coke taxis to the office. Head of HR went on maternity leave, so the CEO seized the opportunity to only look internally for the role and chose solely based on who he wanted to fudge, which he then did. After a company party, the toilets and sinks in the women's bathroom were all backed up. Plumber found multiple condoms stuffed down the sink and flushed down the toilets. We found hand and footprints on the wall tiles, and the security cams showed the last people leaving the office to be 3 straight men in relationships. At a company retreat, an employee did too many mushrooms and shat himself on the beach in front of the entire company. At the same retreat, 3 employees cheated on their partners, and there was one divorce. When we found out, the developers never washed their glasses, just rinsed them and put them back on the shelf. Story 13. I had a friend working a GM when HR thought it was a good idea to test everyone on the skill set needed for their department, regardless of how long they were in their position. Long careers, 15, 20, 25 years, were ruined because even though they worked there for a long time with a long string of great performance reviews, they didn't pass the test that measured what HR thought was required for the department. Say you're a materials expert working in a design department. You may know barely enough in the CAD system to draw a cylinder. On the other hand, given a cylinder, you can whip out all the properties that cylinder would have if it were made from aluminum, cold-rolled steel, fiberglass, etc. You'd be out of your job because HR said you had to have a certain level of CAD expertise, even if it wasn't relevant to your role in the design process. Story 14. I was sitting in the HR office with one of the members of HR. I was waiting on her to finish a form so that we could go eat lunch. Suddenly, this guy comes in. He was a young temp employee and had only been there a week or so, and says he has something he needs to talk about. I start to get up to leave when he blurts out that he doesn't like that fact that there are so many gays and lesbians working in the company. Once he says that, I sit right back down. The HR employee asks him to clarify, and he goes on about how his trainer was gay, and his team lead is gay, and his manager is a lesbian. All true, and he doesn't feel comfortable working around all these gays and lesbians. The HR employee asks him, "Is anyone has every intimacy harassed him?" Which he says they haven't. She then says, "So you want me to fire these employees, strictly based on their intimacy orientation, just so you don't feel uncomfortable?" He says yes, after which she tells him to leave the office. She then calls in his manager and talks with her about it. He ends up quitting by the end of the week. Story 15. My friend who worked in HR told me about her old job, where the boss had drilled a hole from his office through to the ladies' changing rooms and was whacking it every chance he could get. They found out because someone saw the light through the hole as he took the cover off for a peek. He denied everything, and they had to take a DNA sample from the carpet under the hole, which confirmed it was A, him, and B, that he had indeed been whacking away. Story 16. I don't work in HR, but I do have a nightmare HR story. When I was on my gap year, I worked a part-time job as a fitness instructor at a leisure center. One of my co-workers, called him Bill, was a nice guy, and I would often sit and chat to him on my breaks, etc. Long-term GF and baby at home. As part of my job, I used to teach spinning classes on a fairly regular basis. I would normally leave my phone in the staff room while I was teaching, or behind the reception desk. Both these places were secure, and my phone had a passcode on it. I didn't want it going off while I was teaching because when it received calls texts, it interfered with the stereo in the spin studio. I didn't have a locker or anything where I could store it. Sometime in around January, I was at uni for an interview weekend. My girlfriend at the time had come to pick me up, and while she was waiting in the car, she was scrolling through my messages on my iPad. When I got in the car, she showed me one of my chats and said, "Why did you send this video to Bill?" I had no recollection of sending any videos to Bill, since I did not speak to him outside of work beyond him going to be late or similar. I thought it was a mistake, but as I scrolled further back up, I saw that I had sent this same video to Bill a couple of weeks prior. Feeling thoroughly perplexed, I clicked into the video and saw it was a video of me, 20F, and my girlfriend, 26F, on holiday in Thailand. I'd like to stress that it was not an intimacy video. We were just joking around, but we had just got out the shower and were both naked. At this point, I'm still thinking it's some kind of big mistake, as Bill is a nice guy with a baby at home. However, I look a little closer and realize that the dates times of when I had sent these videos was at times I was teaching spin classes and therefore had left my phone unattended. Bill, being the sicko he was, had obviously seen me put my passcode into my phone during all the times we had been chatting on breaks, etc., and had memorized it. He had then taken the opportunity to scroll through all my personal photos and videos when I had left my phone unattended to go and teach classes. I'm assuming that he had deleted the video once, hence why he had sent it to himself again a couple of weeks later. Had also deleted the chat history from my iPhone, but hadn't realized it synced to my iPad. This was in around 2012 BTW. I would only have been about 18-19 at the time when the videos were taken. Obviously, I reported this to my manager and to HR, but it was a bit of a minefield for them to navigate. I don't know what he told them, but I imagine it was along the lines of saying I sent them to him of my own free will. How would he have known my password, etc.? It took a long while to get sorted, but in the end, he did get sacked, thankfully. The police also paid him a visit, so I'm sure he had some explaining to do to his SO. Story 17. One of my company's own HR reps had to be redirected into a different job and then finally requested to resign after the following incident. A co-worker of mine is originally from Hawaii, and her son still lives there. After the ACA was passed in Congress, she went into HR to put her son under her insurance. He was still under 26 at the time, so he was newly qualified under the law. This particular HR rep told my coworker that she actually couldn't put her son on her insurance since he didn't live in the United States. Story 18. We had a guy in one of our stores submit a grievance to us about how we were discriminating against him because we were giving a female 7 months pregnant colleague some extra breaks. She had a medical note confirming the reasonable adjustments needed, so she could sit down for an extra 5 mins every so often because he was unable to get pregnant, so could not take advantage of the same extra breaks. Didn't really know where to start with that one. Answer. I worked in a call center which has a tendency to attract low-intelligent assholes. Granted, not everyone was like that, but I've never seen such a concentration of them at one job before, and when one left, another would be hired to take his place. They got pissed off because HR transformed a little storage room that was previously unused into a room for new mothers to pump their breast milk. They acted like it was the most sexist practice in the world for HR to deem a room only acceptable to women, even though it was just a few women, and acted like it affected their work to know that a woman was in a closed-off room nearby with her titties out. Also, there was an older woman who had cancer, lost her hair, so HR let her be the exception to the no hat, no bandana, etc. rule. Because obviously it can be very traumatic for someone to go through, and they flipped out because apparently regular male pattern baldness had the same negative emotional effects that going bald due to chemo, so they should have been allowed to wear hats and bandanas. Also in another project, there were 2 main leads. One was a low-key racist, who you would hear complain about minorities while on her lunch break, and the other got busted for trying to coerce his workers into sleeping with him. Rip that HR office. God darn am I glad I left that shoot hole. Story 19. Knew a weird dude who would sometimes do all-nighters in the office. A lady got there early one day, around 6:30 a.m., and found the guy self-care to adult content at his cubicle. Crazy thing is, he wasn't fired. I guess he was good enough at working that they just moved him to another department. Answer. I used to work in a cubicle farm. I worked an odd shift, started 4 a.m. and left when I was done with my work. I'd be one of the only people there until around 8 a.m. There was usually one other guy there as early as me. I was a software engineer working in an editorial business. We had adult content images in our database. It wasn't abnormal to have an adult content site up because we would have to index those and have captions and images for various adult content films. This wasn't the focus of the business. It was just something that occasionally had to be done. This one guy would start every morning slowly scrolling through adult content images in our database on the other side of the cubicle farm. I could see it when I walked by to my desk. Story 20. I was asked to translate for some visitors from the parent company at a celebration held by HR. I stopped translating around the time the director of HR started asking overly personal intimacy questions to the two young HR office ladies. A couple days later, during a private bullshit session, I recounted the story to a friend who happened to be a director from the parent company. He put on his professional hat and asked me to write it up and submit.